and also subscribe and click the coins button in the lower corner of this app. I think it's going to be the lower left hand side if you're holding the phone in portrait mode. And if you're holding the phone in landscape mode, it's the lower right hand corner. Click. Thank you for joining. How are you this evening? It is quite cold, quite chilly. So, one of the things that I wanted to discuss with you this evening is the question of the minimum wage. The new president of the United States, Joe Biden, has a proposal that he's considering to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Many of the new economy jobs, like rideshare jobs, Lyft, Uber, they have wages, hourly wages that are just a little under 15, kind of hovering between 7, 9, 10. But, it's we can thank many of the people in the new economy for putting pressure on lawmakers to raise the minimum wage, because the gig economy really has turned this economy, or propped this economy up, some would say, as we have been quarantining, socially distancing, shutting down offices, shutting down schools in order to maintain public health, public safety. So the hourly wage is becoming more and more a point of discussion as people decide how they can make ends meet, and how they can work from home. So a raise in the wage does seem to be something that could happen. So the question is, what would an increase from the current minimum, which is hovering around $7, some places it's $8 an hour, it might be more or less depending on certain communities. But what would a raise in the minimum wage mean for your state? I think it depends on the state's economy. Obviously, states that have very strong economies or large economies, states like California, an increase of $15 might not make that much of a difference. It could mean a $15 raise in some cases for some folks. But in other states where the economy is much, much smaller, an increase in the minimum wage of $15 an hour could, make the difference between whether or not a person can afford to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, for example. It also could be the case that retailers, especially smaller businesses, may increase their prices if there is an increase in the minimum wage. I don't know, I guess the theory is if they are employing hourly workers at $2 an hour, and then the workers are getting tips, that would bring them up to a minimum wage of $7 an hour. If the employer were then forced to pay that worker $15 an hour, then the employer has to make up the difference somehow, and it's going to have to be through retail sales. I mean, could there be alternatives though? Perhaps. What about if the employees were given stock options in the company and somehow were able to reinvest or invest in the company? Would the retail owners be able to keep their prices low at that, lower point if they allowed the employees to say make a contribution to the the stock ownership of the company. So you give the employee a $15 raise, and perhaps $1 out of that $15 goes back to company, or goes into the either the employer pool of money that gets redistributed in dividends. I'm not a financial expert, obviously, but I'm just thinking that in order to counter the argument that the hamburger that once cost $4 is now going to cost $18 just because the employee is now being paid $15 an hour as opposed to $12 an hour. I don't know if it makes much sense to keep that argument afloat, because I really think that there are going to be alternatives that are going to help ameliorate this question. It's kind of remarkable to think that this nation hasn't raised the minimum wage in such a long time, and other costs have increased. Cost of education has increased. The cost of healthcare has increased. The cost of housing has increased. How have people managed? Maybe people haven't been managing that well. We have poor health outcomes when you think about it, and access to education is not that easy. Access to healthcare is still not an easy matter for most people, many people. So, what are your thoughts? Should we raise the minimum wage? Should it be to $15? Should it be to $21? Should there be universal basic income? And speaking of, how have you navigated the lockdown, the quarantine, the situation of COVID-19? Have you started your own business yet? Many people are starting their own business, or going into business for themselves, or taking their side hustle and making it less of a hobby, more of a business. What about you? These are really difficult times economically, but it should not dissuade people from pursuing their passion, pursuing their dream. Do you think that this time of COVID-19 asks us to work more collectively? Are people working together more? Or are people off in their silos? One company that I follow is Sassy Jones, kind of company that is known, and it's actually rapidly being known as a company that supports employees while producing fashion accessories. It was started by a former Verizon employee who left her job in order to design jewelry. She started out just like selling accessories, and then she started to design because she found that she had a really good manufacturer, but she wanted more original designs in her collection. So, with no design training, she decided to pick up this, pen and pencil and create. And then that grew into the business called Sassy Jones, and it was recognized by Black Enterprise magazine as being one of the top companies to work for. I mean, it's $1 million company now within a matter of under 3 years. Well, she's been running the business, I think, for 5, but it grew exponentially in the last 2 years. And it was kind of spurred on by the pandemic, actually, because she moved a lot of the owner's Sharice Jones, and she moved a lot of her marketing enterprise online. And she did a lot of work with Facebook Live and Instagram Live. Okay. Techniques to build an audience during a pandemic. I mean, everyone is sitting at home, and she has captured this audience. She gets thousands of views. She's very entertaining. Not everyone can do that. But I should ask her if she thinks that we should raise the minimum wage. She was talking about her employees. She offers them health care and dental care. And it took her a little bit of time to get to that point, but she said that she really wasn't going to be in the position to hire anybody unless she could offer that. So she built that into the business, built those provisions into the business. I think it's wonderful. Okay. So look for more stories in the news about the minimum wage. And I'd like to know what your thoughts are. You can always reach out to me by making a comment in the comment box, and we can continue this discussion. So thank you so much. Good night.